Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Airspeed's Korra Rewatch video. This one's going to be for K206 The Sting. And as I've talked about so far in Book 2, I've said a bunch of times already that I think Episode 5, Peacekeepers, Episode 6, here, The Sting, are the weakest of the book. I think I've leaned towards saying The Sting, I think, is the weaker of those episodes. And the reason I say that is because I think this episode has probably one of the weirdest, I think, worst writing decisions in the show, and I just think it takes what could have been a really interesting episode, the only real episode of Book 2 where, it's not really about Korra. Here's one where she's only in it for like a couple of seconds right at the end. This gives a chance for the other plot to really get the kind of meat of it in play. Mako kind of gets to be the focus character. Asami gets a focus role. Bolin gets a focus role. But I feel they kind of mess it up. They turn the potential into one of the weakest episodes of like the entire show in a way. The writing decision that I really would criticize is going to be the decision to, for some reason, try and bring Mako and Asami back together as a couple. Now, and it's a weird one because watching just this episode, it's just a moment. Asami kisses Mako, he gives no reaction. So you can come out of this episode thinking that, like, okay, this was just a thing that happened, but they're past it now. Okay. But then they just kind of come back to it later on, and it's like they are a couple again. And they've never really confirmed if they are or are not a couple. And they're still vague about it, even though they're hinting at it more later on in the season. That it makes, like, going into Book 3 very awkward, because it's like, did you start a relationship again or not? Because you hinted at it in so many scenes, but then you sort of went away from it. And I think what it did is it made the episode have this kind of tinge of drama throughout it all, because it was, Mako dealing with the breakup with Korra and, the awkwardness around that. And then it took what could have been this really cool moment of Mako and Asami just getting to go on this kind of like quest together, basically, show that they can be friends even after their breakup in Book 1, and just turns it into more romance drama. In that it immediately cuts off the idea of like, oh, this was a friendship thing, because we immediately return to romance between the two of them again. I don't think it takes away everything from it, but it definitely is just an awkward writing decision that they have here, in that take the drama out of this episode, really make the investigation from Mako a little bit more of a focus. Give Asami, I think, a little bit of a bigger role throughout the episode. Cover more of the business stuff that's going on, just how bad Future Industries is, maybe what Varric has helped her with so far. I think give Varric maybe a little bit of a bigger role in the episode. And I think you have what probably is never going to be anyone's favourite episode, but I think you have a solid episode of the series that really helps to fill in a couple of the little things where there's some problems with this this arc within this season. So the other side of this is that we do get some Nook stuff. This is the more humorous side of it. We'll get back to the more kind of serious stuff a little later on. I like the stuff with Bolin and Nook, and I like them referencing kind of Mako being kind of dismissive of Bolin in the episodes up to now in the season, and then Bolin turning the tables on Mako here when like, oh, now you need my help and you actually like respect my abilities and you need me for something. I'm not going to give you that because I'm actually pretty rich now because I'm a successful movie star. And it's obviously Bolin kind of buying into the hype, just letting the stardom go to his head, but you kind of let him have it for at least a little bit until obviously it kind of goes too far and he has to sort of redeem himself again. But because obviously there's some weirdness with kind of him and Ginger and stuff like that. That's definitely not the best subplot, but the core of Nook and the kind of humor that they get through it with the song, just how it kind of has that element of like the Ember Island Players to it, of just them trying to use basically movie effects to make actual bending, and it clearly being like very early film stuff. So the editing isn't particularly good. They haven't done much work to try and get rid of like the clear special use of special effects and all this kind of costume stuff out of the actual finished product, but people still like it because it's so different, and obviously it being a really clear propaganda piece. Unalaq, the Chief of the North, is the villain, and Nuktuk is this legendary hero from the South. It's clear what it's trying to do, and the popularity obviously basically brings Bolin into being a star. It's just that he's sort of associating him being a star on screen with him being a star off screen, when that still has to be proven. So I like the Mako Bolin conflict because it is the idea of just like, you know, Bolin is kind of struggling to find himself, and Mako hasn't been particularly helpful to him. So him turning it back on Mako is a bit kind of it makes sense. And of course, part of the plot here is that we have to kind of have a lot of things happen to Mako. We have to have no one really listen to him. He's on track to figure this all out, but no one is helping him get to this point. He's not being allowed to fully, you know, investigate things because we know he's on track, but he's not being allowed to. And as I said before, it has a nice payoff to the point where, like, I think it's just about worth it. It's just unfortunate that the meat of this plot in this episode, I think they very much detract from it with some of the other stuff in the episode. And then just some of the timing of stuff isn't the best. What I mean by that is that I think this plot actually has the potential to be a really big moment for Mako, just because the payoff is him really accelerating his career in the police force. Him basically proving himself more or less worthy enough to be Lin's kind of, in a way, second in command almost. That Mako immediately becomes Lin's kind of go-to detective. And it kind of it allows for a little bit of character development with Lin, of just her realizing the sort of error of not listening to the rookie and still having that sort of mentality. Whereas Lu and Gon were just dismissing everything, and she realizes that they are actually somewhat incompetent cops themselves. So he gets that really strong payoff. It's just the steps to get to the point where the payoff actually happens. Unfortunately, it happens in some of the weaker episodes of the season. But I like it because at the very least, Book 2 is giving Mako a plot, which isn't something that he gets really in Book 3. He really doesn't get a plot. Book 4 he does, but it's more or less, you know, it feels like he's put in this really much lower position because he's placed with Wu in Book 4. But you know, at least here it's a actual plot where he kind of has to, you know, develop a bit, you know, maybe not be so harsh on his brother and stuff like this, but it is brought down by whatever they're trying to do with Asami and Mako. As I said, I think the approach they should have taken here is use this as a way to basically be like, this is the first time Mako and Asami are sort of having time together as friends since their breakup, and use this as a way to sort of get past whatever potential awkwardness there still is in the aftermath of the breakup, because they've never really addressed, you know, like how Asami feels about the fact that Mako and Korra like got together immediately or anything like that. So I felt that you sort of needed to address that, and it was on the verge of getting to that point, but then they immediately just went, oh, let's have Asami kiss Mako and sort of get this back on track. Again, drama, drama, drama. That's all the writers seem to focus on when it comes to romance here, instead of any sort of meaningful connection between the characters. And it really detracts from things. Not just because the romance isn't good, but it actually detracts from other stuff going on. In that a lot of the scenes that could be used to like develop the triads and what's going on there, maybe add more mystery to the plot, with how the kind of eventual betrayal of the triple threats happens, it's just used to kind of have like Two-Toed Ping quiz Mako about his bad relationship issues with Korra, and have the drama of him revealing that to Asami come out. That's where I think some of the problems come in. What I think is good in this episode is that it is a bit of a different plot, getting to see the triads and so on. I really like the boat chase sequence. It's a really different action scene that we have. Seeing the triple threats pursue Mako and Asami on the speedboats is a very unique sequence. Getting to see the firebending. Viper gets a chance to shine here as the new leader of the triple threats, and you see him do some pretty powerful waterbending, in that like Mako's at a complete disadvantage out here in the kind of open water up against the waterbender. But I think it also highlights as well that even though this is setting up towards the big Varric reveal right at the end, the episode fundamentally isn't really about Varric, and it means that what ends up being the focus plot is the Sting operation, which is basically utilizing the triple threats as like the main characters for like Mako and Asami to kind of play off. And I think we've sort of realized, even this far into the series, that the triple threats are the triads in general are a fine addition to the universe in terms of like, here's something that's adding conflict to the city. They really added to the Bender non-Bender plot as the main, I suppose, kind of enemy of non-Benders in a way, that they were causing the problem. They're the Benders you can point to as being like the proof for what the non-Benders had to say. But they were never really the focus. They were taken out quite quickly, and they were just here and thereabouts. Getting them as the focus here again, it highlights that they don't work all that much as the main plot, especially with such a basic portrayal as this. And it's the exact same reason why I don't think Turf Wars has been particularly interesting. Triads as the main plot doesn't really work. What's interesting in Turf Wars, the comic, is that Tokuga is part spirit. And it's really got nothing to do with the triads themselves. It's just, what are they going to do with the unique aspect that the leader of this group is now part spirit, and the mechanics and explanation around that, rather than it being anything specific about the triads themselves. And that's always been the problem with them. And especially with what they've done in the comics right now, taking away the more unique aspect of the triads, that being that there's all these different ones, they have different kind of, I suppose, beliefs, different kind of people they actually allow into their organization and so on. Like the Red Monsoons is a waterbending triad, the Agni Kais are a firebending triad, Terra Triad is a kind of earthbending one, Creeping Crystals, another earthbending one, and the triple threats are the only ones that really do multi-bending. They could have added uniqueness by kind of incorporating more of them in here, and I think it's now become, I think, a major weakness of the triad kind of world building kind of idea of just it's basically the triple threats and nothing else. That none of the other stuff matters, even though they talk about it a little bit, and it's just triple threats, triple threats, triple threats. We don't care about the others. And they just took what could have been an interesting idea and made it much, much less interesting in the comics. And even the show, never really using the other triads, I think is a bit of a problem. But you know, it's not everything that there is to the episode. I like the running kind of, I suppose, detective aspect of the episode of the detonators, and Mako having really placed importance on the idea of the detonators, that there was, you know, Agni Kai members that initially did this, and trying to really get to the root of this through that. And then his issues with Bolin actually bringing him into contact with Varric related stuff, and on the movie set finding out that, oh, they do kind of movie, kind of fake explosions using remote detonators. So they're using the exact same products to do the actual explosions. So these ships that we saw earlier on in the episode are not being taken out by actual Northerners. They're being taken out by Varric's kind of thugs, basically, acting as Northerners to make it seem like the North is doing all this terrible stuff to add to the overall kind of intrigue of, you know, getting everyone up against the North. And again, the idea that, like, Varric is the one orchestrating this conflict. Unalaq is, yes, I think, being somewhat antagonistic with how forceful to a degree he's being with the North, but the main conflict really is coming from Varric. Not to diminish the fact that they shouldn't even try to kind of get independence for the South, but watching this book again, and specifically this first section of the book, you do really see how it is Varric who is the one behind a lot of this in terms of really creating the conflict. Unalaq is just kind of like, he has his troops there to protect what he's actually trying to accomplish, which at this stage we don't even know just yet. But he himself is not actually the one really wanting a war as such to happen. So I do find that quite interesting, and then it leads to that, I think, really actually good cliffhanger of the reveal that Varric is actually the one behind this, in that Asami's just signed her complete company away to save it, and you realize now everything that's happened up to now, Varric helping them in all of these situations, it's all been to get people on his side against Unalaq in this conflict, and he's orchestrated all these different events to make the North look bad. Add that to the propaganda he's doing with Bolin, and you can see he's using nearly every member of Team Avatar to kind of get what he wants in this situation. And now he's also basically got control of Asami's company by basically bringing it down himself and then acting as the savior. And now Mako's onto him, but he can't just flat out reveal this in front of Asami because, for one, like, what a scene, like, if Mako was just to reveal you've just signed your company to the person who put it into this situation in the first place, and he has no proof. He doesn't have enough proof just yet, but the way Varric's face is, the way they animate his face here, you know that this is Varric doing his kind of big evil move here. And while, again, it's not a huge focus of Book 2, the whole Varric plot, it's as an introduction and just this complete character shift from this kind of crazy businessman who's rich and eccentric and does all these weird things to now he's orchestrated all of this himself because he doesn't like Unalaq, and is also having a war happen to basically gain profit for himself is effectively the idea here. It's the, I think, classic sort of businessman villain arc, but it works really well because Varric isn't just a, you know, dull businessman. He is this kind of absurd character who you didn't expect to do this sort of thing. And now the question is going to be like, okay, like, Mako knows about it, but how is he actually going to properly prove this now that, you know, he doesn't really have the support network, in that, like, he feels like he's lost a lot of trust with Lin, and he's not really going to get much help there, and all of this stuff. So it sets up this, like, side arc of, like, how's Mako going to really make this all happen and kind of solve things while Korra's out of action. Other than that, in the episode, we got a quick scene with Unalaq, Eska, and Desna, with them just being sort of shocked that he's come out of the spirit portal, and the first hints that, like, he's not telling them everything, he's not incorporating them into the plan entirely, and then him beginning to sort of lose control over everything that's happening. He didn't expect Korra to react as emotionally as she did to everything that happened before. He expected to be able to keep her on his side, and now he sent Eska and Desna out to bring Korra back, but they've come back reporting that a dark spirit took her, and that, as far as they're aware, she's dead. And his plans are more or less up in flames at this point in time, in that the one person who could open the other portal is now gone. His plan, which again we don't know about just yet, why he wants both portals open and the significance behind it beyond just better spirituality in the world, that is not going to work anymore because Korra is quote unquote out of action, and we learn, of course, by the end of the episode, she's still alive, but the villains are pretty much convinced that she's dead. So it's a really good setup for, Korra to have this, I suppose, time away from everything to get the story that we're going to get over the next 2 episodes, and then have her reveal herself back to everyone as being, alive. So yeah, the end of this episode is obviously the direct setup for Beginnings. Her landing on the shores of Bonte Island, Bonte Village. Again, as I'll sort of discuss maybe a little bit more in the next video, the whole idea of it being Bonte Village, it's sort of like kind of canon in that I think it comes from, the script for Beginnings, which we've seen a little bit of one of the drafts at the least, where this island was specifically referred to as Bonte Village or Bonte Island. And I think people have just taken to calling it that, in the same way that, like, we know a bunch of the island names from Avatar, primarily through kind of other sources and not really like directly them being said in the show. So until it's otherwise contradicted, I think it's a fair enough place to just call it Bonte Village, Bonte Island. And we see some fire sages here, and we find out that Korra has lost her memory. She doesn't remember anything of what happens. She doesn't even respond to, like, what's Avatar Korra? Who's that? So pretty bad situation, and it makes sense. She's been attacked by a spirit, so she hasn't just suffered like physical damage, that she's kind of been suffered, spiritual damage as well. And as we'll find out, that directly relates to the Avatar state, and us learning, I suppose, the truth about what the spiritual side of the Avatar actually is in the next 2 episodes. So yeah, we're going to have a huge shift in the rewatch here as we go from these last 2 episodes, where I've been fairly negative on the series, like for Peacekeepers, and this one, to really big praise for the next 2 episodes, because we go from effectively 2 of the weakest episodes of Korra to, in my opinion, the 2 best episodes of Korra, and for me probably the 2 best episodes of Avatar overall, which I get why a lot of people might not agree with that statement, but I at least think it's, not a crazy thing to say. I get it from the perspective of, like, it's more of a side kind of a story with different characters that aren't really the main characters, and in that sense, like, I'd be like, okay, yeah, like, if you wanted me to choose episodes that more heavily address the actual characters, then yeah, Beginnings is a really good little side story, but one of the best episodes involving the actual main cast is a little bit of a different thing. But talking about it overall, 2 episodes that tell a story, amazing stuff in Beginnings. Anything else to talk about here? I suppose with Asami, before I really finish this review, I've talked, I think, throughout the Korra rewatch so far about Asami and how she's, I think for sure, the weakest member of Team Avatar across the entire series with regards to characterization and how much plot they give her. She has her best episode in the entire series in Book 1 with Episode 7, The Aftermath, and for the most part, that's her entire arc, is that and sort of where it goes. It's her father, her relationship with her father, and then bringing it back in Book 4. It's here in Book 2 and 3 where I think they really miss the mark. And I think it's a huge part of why, Korrasami, it took Mike O'Brien really explaining Korrasami for people to, a lot of people to fully, like, accept it and so on. It would have been helped so much if they had actually, I think, used Asami as an actual main character in the other seasons, season 2 and 3 here. They try with this idea of, like, oh, I want to get my business back on track. They don't give it enough focus. In a way, Varrick immediately, like, eclipses Asami as a character because they're both, business people. But Varrick is just such a more interesting character. And they tried to have the emotional arc here of just, Asami coming to terms with the fact that she's basically lost everything here. This last shipment has failed. The company is basically bankrupt as far as we're aware. But I think the problem is that she's in this situation where she's lost her company, and she just goes to kiss Mako, and I'm like, okay, she's in this kind of vulnerable situation. Here's someone who cares about her, she cares about. Okay, but can you not make a more plot kind of reason for something like that to happen? Just use the fact that they're friends as an opportunity to do something here, and create a more of a plot around Asami and Future Industries. As it is, it just feels like she's now used as a plot element within someone else's plot rather than this being her plot. In that I don't feel she gets anything out of this. In that the biggest, I think, problem with all of this, by the end of this book, we don't know. It's never said to us or stated to us how or when she gets her company back. It's just this assumed thing that because Varric is later arrested in the series, that Asami gets her company back, and we just go into book 3 and everything's fine. It's just, I think it's an example of just a dropped plot point of just, they started on something here that had potential, they used it here to a degree, and then had to just get rid of it. In that Asami doesn't play an important role in the rest of the series for the most part, outside of being one of the only people able to fly a plane. That's her role basically for most of the rest of the series. And it's really unfortunate because there's potential in the character, but they just didn't give her anything. And we'll see this especially in book 3, where they don't really have anything for her. And we'll see a lot of that with the characters in book 3 as we get to it. But I think it's most of what I want to talk about here. It's just an unfortunate one in that I think at times I've maybe come across as being very anti-Asami, but it just comes from a place of there's very little substance there. I don't know what to feel about the character because they didn't present us enough about her. Even in the comics right now, I don't feel I'm learning more about her as a character. It just feels like she's Korra's girlfriend rather than Asami really standing out on her own as a character as such. Her big moments are her and her father. And I don't think we've got enough moments of just Asami getting a chance to shine on her own. Even Mako in his plot here is showing his detective skills, how he's dealing with a lot of stuff kind of going wrong in his life. Bolin's getting a very personal arc of his own, and it gets a big payoff. Mako gets a big payoff. Korra gets a big emotional, development arc here. Tenzin does. Tonraq to a degree has developed in this book. Even Eska and Desna to a degree have a little bit of substance to their arc. Asami not so much. They really do drop it. And her focus in the rest of the book is piloting the machinery, the vehicles, and a little bit of romance drama towards the end. And it's really, really unfortunate. But we'll see exactly how they use Asami in the coming episodes. But as I said, we're going to have a huge shift going from 2 of the weakest episodes to 2 of the best episodes. So Beginnings Part 1 is up next. And it's going to be such a breath of fresh air to go from these 2 into the next 2. So, yeah, that's been the review for The Sting. Thanks for watching, and bye.